Are you a man who's struggling to gain confidence as a leader? Do you lack clarity in how to find it? Well, this is the Men Are Forged podcast, and I'm your host, Cartwright Morris. And like many of us, I too have struggled to gain confidence in many areas of my life that I needed confidence to excel. So I went on a pursuit to gain confidence by taking more risk in my decision-making and in my relationships, and it led not only to confidence in my life, but success. Each week, you'll hear men speak about the risks taken and the confidence gained in their business, relationships, and faith. And if you're looking for the same, you can go to menareforged.com to find out more about what I do in my confidence-gaining leadership program. Now for today's episode. All right, welcome into the Men Are Forged podcast. I'm with a great guest today, Kipp Sorensen, with the Order of Man, the Iron Council, as well as his journeyteam.com. You can check out more about that, what he does outside of just Order of Man. But Kipp, man, it's great to have you in today.
Dude, it's good to be on. And it sounds cheesy. Some people that have ever heard me talk, I always say this, but there's so much power in the conversation. And even if we weren't hitting record, I feel confident that I'd be edified by whatever we talk about because we're talking about important things, right? And so I'm always eager to have good conversation about what ultimately matters.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So Kipp, I think we got a similar heartbeat here because I think I am not a surface level conversation guy. Like guys, like I love watching the game. I love having a beer. I love doing the activity stuff. But that's probably, to me, an excuse to go a little bit deeper. Let's talk about something that matters. And so totally. I think you're in similar, like, let's have something. So I'm curious, really, I mean, right off the bat, speaking of that, like, how do you, I mean, with the Iron Council, I mean, this is the point of getting men together and like, let's add value to each other's lives through being in community, collaborating, building. So how is some of the ways that you've learned in your own life, you start to apply to this group of men online?
Yeah, like we'll run that question by me one more time. I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
So, 100%. I mean, really, I'm really just curious about the Iron Council itself. But what's the personal entry point for you? What happened in your life that makes you go, man, I need to have this in my life, but I need to help men have this in their own life. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. Here's this.
Yeah.
And I think this is the natural transition of growth. And if we look at young men, this is the same kind of growth pattern is taker. They start providing value. And then before you know it, the echelon of that is we're serving others. And for me, when I found out about the Order Man podcast, when I joined the Iron Council, it was about me. It wasn't about anybody else. It was about me becoming a better person. And be frank, also it was about me looking good. And I'm on the path that is superficial, right? And as I get my reps, and as I got more involved in the Iron Council and banding with other men and seeing the value, eventually you get to a point where you're like, this isn't about me. This isn't about my personal growth. And I even say we could say this outside of the Iron Council, we get to a point where going to the gym is not even about you. Mm-hmm. Going to the gym is about modeling a behavior for our kids. Wow. It's about being an example to people in our neighborhood, right? And eventually now we're showing up in a way that it's not self-serving as much, but it's about modeling and showing up powerfully for those around us. And to be frank, that is where we get satisfaction in life. That is where we find fulfillment and ultimately live a life without regret is by showing up that way.
Yeah. So in a world where it is like, it's all about changing the world, changing the big systems. And I mean, it sounds like y'all, and especially you, have this core belief, like just start with, your little circle, your friends, your family, your kids, your wife, like how is that I mean, when you encourage men to do that, how do you implement more of that in your life?
Yeah. I mean, let's call out the people that don't do that first. Cause this drives me mad, right? In fact, it makes me really upset. I'll give you a perfect example. I made a post, I don't know, a couple months ago after our local voting, happened. Right. Mm-hmm. And something to the extent of, awesome, now that you voted, go out and actually do something that's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think we do that. I think we latch on to like social issues because they're easy. Oh, well, I'm standing up for the minority. I'm standing up for but because I made a social media post. Are you kidding? Like that is so weak time, and so we don't do the hard thing. We latch on to social issues because we want to feel justified. We want to feel like we're contributing value. And to be honest, it's a cop-out. You know what the hard thing is to do? Is to manage your temper, show it powerfully in your home, and teach your kids. That's harder than anything. But we have a tendency we'll offshore that to schools. We'll offshore that to our wives because, I got to work and I don't have time for those. Like we avoid the difficult constantly. And it's ironic because you'll get people that have social justice warriors about social issues. And then you can ask them and say, hey, well, how's your neighbors doing? How's everybody on your street? Are they taken care of? Are they, do they know that you care and that you're there to serve them? Oh, actually, I've never met them before. But you feel justified and self-righteous about helping some elusive group that you don't even know.
Right.
Oh man, that's weak.
Yeah.
Super weak. Yeah. So I think, and you're not ready for that. I actually, that's the other aspect that I kind of feel about is I'm not ready to stand in the position of greater influence if I haven't gotten reps. And one of the best ways to get the reps is, hey, I have solid reps with my kids. I have solid reps with my extended family. I have solid reps in my community. I have solid reps with the smaller community groups that I'm a part of. Now I'm in a position to then actually branch out and have larger impact. But if we're not taking care of that other stuff, it doesn't matter, right? You got me going, man. I'm sorry. But like you're upset with quote unquote where America is, for instance. Like, how do we get this place? And what do we latch to? Oh, we better vote in the right person. You know what?
Right.
Our government is a reflection of the people. So if you don't like how government's showing up, then the problem is the people. And I'm saying that not from the perspective that we should throw our hands up and go, oh, well, it's the masses. No, it's the people. And the people is made up of what? A state, the people in a state, the people in the neighborhood in that state, the people on your street, right? Yeah. And that's where it needs to start.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it really is. I mean, for me, I like to say it's like moral, like virtue brokering. Like you're trying to broker your virtue because gaining integrity and morals, it's hard. Like you said, it's not putting in the work.
Hard.
Yeah, put in the reps.
Yeah.
So I would love just to back up because I think really your story, you're doing all these things and this message is powerful. I mean, trying to get men just to own that, like where you're at, what you've been given, what you know, where in your life, where in your background, where you feel like that's been like preparing you for what you're doing now.
Oh man, there's so many elements to my life. And I think this is a profound question because if we don't look at our pasts and identify where there's opportunity to learn and grow, then it's a waste.
Right.
It was a waste. That suffering or whatever was a waste if we don't learn and grow from it. Right. Yeah. And it's insightful. Like I'll give you an example. I without too much backstory, this is kind of weird actually. But I don't know, it's coming to my mind, so I'll share it. But so I missed out in tons of like elementary schooling, right? So like kindergarten, I only attend part of kindergarten. I don't think I went to first grade, second grade, maybe a fraction of third grade and a fraction of fourth grade. I remember I was consistently going to school by fifth grade.
Right.
Which is not good because I remember being in fifth grade and my paradigm and self-talk was, you're stupid. And I remember being in a math class at the school in Arizona and the teacher's covering some basic stuff at the beginning of the school year. And I had no idea what he's talking about. And when you have the mindset, I'm dumb, that same mindset, you're not going to raise your hand because you don't think you're capable. Right. And so I didn't raise my hand, go, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. Because I didn't want to get found out. And you can see all the correlations because we do this as adults still, right?
100%.
But I didn't want to get found out. I didn't understand what was going. But I had grit because of how I was raised. And so my thought process was double down, figure it out, shoot from the hip, troubleshoot, more or less self-taught myself, self-taught to get up to par and not be found out by anybody. And it was really interesting. And that's actually, I'm a business consultant. And as a consultant, that's like a superpower.
Right.
It's a superpower for me to like listen to a problem and identify and find a solution that I don't even know is a solution yet.
Yeah.
And so those little elements of that as a kid, or my family had a dairy farm when I was a child, right? And so I was kind of raised on a farm with a father that, in my opinion, no one has ever worked harder in their life than this man, right? Really? And so I got the benefit of delayed gratification. Like I learned that even though I might go work today and I don't want to do it, at the end of the day, I'm going to feel amazing because of what I accomplished, right? But it took a whole day to get there, right? And so these are all these small lessons and things that kind of contributed to ultimately to how I show up in the world. And man, I could go all day with just these small little things that I've slowly identified as I've gotten older. Of like, man, where did I get that from? You know, why do I have a superpower in this area? And it's really just through these little nuanced experiences.
Yeah. So I'm curious because I relate similarly, just hearing that voice, even as an adult, that you're stupid, you won't figure this out, which it caused me to not take risk. It caused me to pull back. So where have you seen that in your adult life come up where you hear that voice and instead of causing you to withdraw? I mean, a lot of men, we use insecurity, we puff up, right? How have you learned to address that voice and like, no, I am capable, I am smart, you know?
Totally. And I want to be clear, and I don't know about you, but for me, and I think this is generally the case with everybody, is when we have this conversation about kind of negative self-talk or whatever, people think like, oh, how do I get rid of it? Let me just destroy that concept right now. You're not getting rid of it.
Yeah.
So deal with it. Now the question is how are you going to deal with it, and how quickly do we deal with it? Right. And we deal with it appropriately, but you're not going to stop it, right? At least I haven't figured out how to stop it. Right. So it's still a message, right? It's still a message of mine of like, you're not good enough. You're going to be found out. Once someone finds out, then they're not, or even I'll undermine myself so much that if you gave me a compliment, I'll be like, man, thank you so much. And then I'll be like, it's because he doesn't know me.
Wow. Yeah.
This is like rooted in me, and there's power in actually understanding where that came from too. Right. Yeah. Which luckily I've done that work to kind of understand where that's come from. So there's value first in that pause of like, is that true? Like, is that truth? Yes or no? And if it's not truth, then the second step in the process of like understanding, like, where's that coming from? And so let me use maybe even a little bit more emotional example. So if my wife does something and I interpret her action as meaning, right? Because as humans, we are meaning making machines. Yeah. We add meaning to all things constantly. And so wife does X, I make it mean X, and then I want to have an emotional response, right? And when I make that emotional response, I have to ask myself, is that true? Did my wife forgetting to do something I asked her to do translate to she doesn't love me and doesn't respect me? No, like she didn't say that. That's right. My interpretation, right? But it's also valuable to understand what I call kind of your always listening. We're always listening for something. So sorry, I'm kind of all over the place here. So let me explain that really quick. You see the world a particular way based upon defining moments of your life. There's probably major instances in all of our lives where we saw the world a particular way, something occurred, and now we decided we're going to see it differently. And mostly that different way of seeing the world is actually how we see ourselves. Unfortunately, then we become adults and we find evidence of why that's true. Yeah. And then, so I'm always listening from the perspective of I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always listening from the perspective of I am going to get abandoned. I'm always listening from the perspective of these things. And so the minute I have a trigger or I see anything, I go, oh, see, it's true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I emotionally react and then blah, 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 right? And so being clear on where that's coming from is the key, because then I can pause. I can go, wait, that's not true. Where's this coming from? Okay, actually, I'm projecting on my wife and I'm treating her a particular way that's completely based upon this other perception of how I see the world about myself and has nothing to do with what she actually did. Course correct, right? And then we can clear it up. The other thing that has really helped me personally, especially when we talk about humility and and the willingness to not be found out, especially once we get in a leadership position, who are my best employees? What are the best employees? The ones that are confidently humble.
Yeah.
They go, hey, Kipp, I don't understand this, but they're eager and they're hungry. You love them. Yeah. The employees you can't stand are the ones that are pretending to know they know something when they don't, because they're stifling their growth.
Yeah.
Right. They're not willing to expose themselves to actually learn. And so the more I see that in people and the more I respect that and I see the value in it, it reminds me of Kipp, confident humility. Be confident that I can figure it out, but be humble enough to say, I don't have it figured out yet.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. It makes me think of a John Maxwell quote. I'd rather look stupid than be stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And here's the deal. You know this, the people that's pretending, that's trying not to look stupid, we all know that they're stupid. We all know that it's all smoke and mirrors.
Right.
They're flexing just to make sure that, you think they know it. The only person fooled by that lie is actually probably us. We think it's working, but we all know when someone's being inauthentic.
Yes, 100%. And you also hit on something that's interesting, being aware of those triggers, those things. I mean, countless times in my coaching sessions, a lot of my guys, I'll have to tell them, the way your wife treated you or the way your boss yelled at you, 90% of it doesn't have to do with you.
Totally.
And so and I think that's important for I think that's important of reading the Bible sometimes, is we have a different narrative that we can, pull from that is more positive, that is more good than the narrative that's in our head.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally. So, I love back up, and you mentioned your dad bringing you hard work. So what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned from your dad, and where have you seen other men add to that, especially hard work in your life?
Yeah. My dad contributed the concept that you work until the work is done. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is no it's 6 p.m. or the day's up.
Falling.
No, you go until it's done. Period. And he pushed that concept to a level that I didn't think was achievable, if that makes sense. It was quite inspirational in regards to how in depth or how dedicated he was. And I don't know. I think most of us would, earlier in my years, and certainly the average person, there's no way things would fall apart if they were tasked with the same level of work that was required of him, that he enlisted in. Now, in the same breath, I think there's always there's a dichotomy to all things, right? Everyone's like, oh yeah, work is the answer. Actually, kind of, maybe. Or are you using work as a justification to avoid more difficult things and
going home?
Not showing up powerfully? Yeah, exactly. Not showing up for our wives and our kids, right? It's totally feasible, right? And so for me and my relationship with my father, it was hey, I'm going to steal that from him. I'm going to steal that working hard, that work ethic, and delayed gratification. I'm not going to steal other stuff from him though, right? That whole hey, spend time with your kids and make sure that they know that they're loved. Well, he was horrible at it, right? So I'm going to learn from that mistake, and I'm going to show up differently there. And man, constant balance, man. And
Right.
always kind of evaluating how we're showing up and making sure that, that, it's serving our purpose, right? And making sure that those priorities stay aligned. On the other note too, though, if you don't mind me getting a little bit on a tangent, man, work ethic is everything, in my opinion. Our best consultants, and maybe I shouldn't even state this like publicly where it's getting recorded. So generally speaking, our best employees are people that move to the city from some small town and have a history of grind and a different level of work ethic.
Right.
Those are our best people. And there's something to be said for that. I'll give you an example. I think as an example, I'm sure you get this a lot in the work that you do, is we glorify and we sometimes focus on like not what's on our laps, but like this other thing, right? And we get this a lot, even in the Iron Council. Guys will be like, oh yeah, I'm working on my side hustle, man. I got the side hustle, blah, blah, blah. And I'm creating this opportunity for myself on the side hustle, right? And I'm like, how about your job right now? How's that going? Oh, you're 9 to 5. Oh, okay. You're not fully committed and bought into what you're doing, right? Like, are you showing it powerfully there?
Right.
Are you killing it with what's on your lap today? Oh, no. I'm focusing my attention over on the side hustle. It's like, man, how many things and opportunities are sitting on our laps, but they're hidden by hard work and we don't see them. Yeah. And thus we never take advantage of them because they're on the other side of hard work and we're taking the easy route.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there been so going back to even your dad and talking about hard work, is there a redemptive way to look at hard work? Like, I mean, obviously the work smarter, not harder. Is there a way that you've seen that where you've learned that balance? And was there a hard moment that actually created like, hey, man, I'm coming home too late, or you're getting feedback from a man in your life or something? Is there a moment that you were like, man, I got to figure this out, and hard work, I have to redefine it? Today's episode is brought to you by Thrive Marriage Lab. If you want your marriage to thrive, this is a great opportunity to you, because strong marriages are the bedrock of strong churches, organization, families, and community. This is a 12-month pathway for any of you that are looking to really have weekly engagement with experienced marriage counselors. Not just one, but many. So go to restory.life/thrive to get on the waiting list for this great program that starts in April. That's restory.life/thrive. And make sure you put the word Forge in the promo code to receive a discount on your monthly fee. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, I think for me, it was just reps, right? As a kid, it's like, hey, you got, I don't know, we have to irrigate this field at 10 p.m. at night, and you got school in the morning. You know what I mean? And it was unreasonable, right? And that's a phrase I like to use a lot. We need to be unreasonable because we always have reasons of why things should or should not be a way. And so was it easy for me to be reasonable and go, well, I shouldn't have to irrigate a field at 10 p.m. at night when it's a school night, and this is going to take me a couple hours and I'll be soaking wet. And by the time I get back and I take a shower, it's like, woe is me. Like, is that reasonable? Sure. I could talk to 95% of the population, share that story with them, and they would go, oh, woe is Kipp. Well, you got it tough. And I could feel sorry for myself, but it's like, that's not where growth is. And so I think as a kid, it was just reps, like these little reps of like, okay, doing that. Oh, that sucks. Okay, well, I'm going to do this. Oh, that sucks. And eventually it's like focusing on the moment, right? Like one I don't know who I stole this from, but I remind myself of this all the time, even when I work out, is I go, do your best, forget the rest. That's all. That's all that's required. It doesn't matter if I do some crazy century set of 100 reps of something, right? I'm thinking like, oh, I got to do. No, you don't got to. You just have to do your best. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
Stop the noise, the internal dialogue, the complaining, the everything else, and just do your best.
Yeah.
And just put your head down and grind. And I just feel like it was just reps as a kid that eventually I feel like I just grind out stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious now because I know you're a dad, right? Yeah, and so you hit on something because now you live in Salt Lake City. You grew up in a small town. You said some of your best consultants are from small towns. And I think there is, to a point you made, like sometimes when, I think part of our growth is exposure to more people, to bigger experiences. But I think there can also be entitlement associated with that, like especially like social media or growing up in a big city where you're exposed more, where you think you're entitled to these things versus a small town. Like, this is all I know. And so you learn a level of toughness, like you said, 10 p.m., irrigating a field. So how have you found as a dad to find balance in those things, exposing your kids to new things, but also like, hey, sometimes you just got to do it. Do your best. Show up,
Dude, this is super tough. I make the joke all the time that if we really wanted to do what was best for our kids, we would give up our current lifestyles.
Yeah.
We would move to a small town and we would get a farm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm too selfish, right? I'm like, I don't want to do that. Right. And so I'm like, hey, I did my grind, man. Like, I don't want to do that. And so what do? I now reward myself with a comfortable living.
Mm-hmm.
My kids partake of that comfortable living, and it's not what is best for them. Right. Yeah. That's kind of the truth.
Right.
And so we have to create opportunity for them to learn delayed gratification. And I really latch onto that concept because I actually think it's the root of most problems in the rising generation is delayed gratification, because we're fighting. Let me give you some statistics.
Yeah.
Not exact statistics, Kipp statistics, right? Where I read something, I'm like, I'm going to hold on to that, but I don't remember the exact numbers. Is that fair?
Right.
So the amount of dopamine that a kid, the feel-good hormone, right? The amount of dopamine a kid gets from playing a video game doesn't even come close to the amount of dopamine they get from doing a hard task and getting verbal reward from mom and dad.
Yeah.
It doesn't even come close.
Yeah.
How do you compete with that? Right? Like that's the whole premise of your kids making good decisions, right? Like, make good decisions, and mom and dad had, like, gave me validation that was a good decision, made me feel good, and it creates some reps for them, right? Meanwhile, we inject video games that just blow that out of the water. Then we inject social media, the likes, the views, all these things that don't even come close to just like making morally right decisions.
Yeah.
And then we soften the world around them. And now there's rarely an opportunity for them to feel there's rarely an opportunity for them to feel the gratification of a hard day's work.
Right. Yeah.
Because midday they don't want to do it. It's too hard. And or we don't even have something. Like, what's the biggest thing I have in our town? Mow the lawn? Really? That's all I got, right? Like, how do I create some hardship? And that's why when my boys were younger, like, going backpacking was always like an opportunity for us to grind, and I'd done some, to be frank, kind of some ridiculous stuff with my older boys where, I remember a couple winters ago, my oldest son is actually legally blind, and he, at nighttime, it's like lights out. He can't see anything once it's dark. Right. And, it was probably like December, and we live close to the mountains in Utah. And, I go, hey boys, you want to go snow camping? And they're like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, all right, like, unreasonable, right?
Yeah.
Completely unreasonable. It's wicked cold outside and there's a lot of snow, right? Like, this is stupid. And so I'm like, yeah, let's go. I'll get home at 5. I'll get home a little early at 5, where it's like, gives us an hour of light, around that time. We throw on some snowshoes. We hike up the mountain. and we're hiking in the dark. I got one son like tied off on rope so I could tug on the rope so he knows where to walk because he can't even see anything. So here's my son like blindly hiking through snow on a mountain.
Wow.
Why? Because we're reckless, right? Because we're unreasonable, because there's some value in the grind. Our water's frozen. It was miserable. We froze our butts off all night. So we just try to create opportunity. And ironically enough, with those kind of kids, those are the most memorable experiences.
100%.
I'd take Boy Scouts out on hikes and it was a disaster. Freak snowstorm, kids are soaking wet. It was miserable. And those kids will talk about it to this day. Oh, remember that time? Because they won. They did something that was unreasonable, that was amazing, and they grind through it. And I kind of latch onto that, right? I'm all about, I had a neighbor, he was just like, hey, I want to run a half marathon, last minute. You want to do it? I'm like, yeah, sure, let's go. There's just kind of something about it, right? Just doing something that I shouldn't do, but I can, so I will.
Yeah, and you find out a lot about yourself, I think, in those moments. I am tougher than I think.
Totally.
Yeah. Man, that's so cool. Exposing your kids to those experiences is so neat. I mean, were they complaining or were they just, man, Dad, this is what we're doing?
When they were young enough, I started doing that young enough that when they were younger, of course they complained, right? I'm tired, my legs are sore. You know what I mean? Of course, right? But now that they're young men, it's like, all right, let's go.
Yeah. So, and there's something too, even just I would say much of my upbringing, learning to embrace the discomfort, leaning into it versus, I have a friend, he calls it squirming. You just kind of want to avoid, move around, and training a kid at a young age just to lean into it.
Yeah. There's satisfaction in the lean into it.
Yeah.
I talk about, I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu and I've been training for a long time, and it sounds really actually bad, but I don't know, maybe some people will relate to this, but when I'm training with someone and let's say some guy grinds his knee into my face and I feel a little bit of pain, my thought is is that all you got? Right? I want to take my face and shove it into his knee harder. You know what I mean? I'm just it's kind of that lean into it. Let's feel this, right? Let's go. Even this morning I was doing arms and I was high rep arm exercise. So my arms feel like burning calves, and I reached my rep limit and I thought 5 more, right? Let's tear these things, let's lean into it. Let's really feel it.
Gosh. And there's something, I think, going back to what you said about dopamine, the endorphins that hit when you really do something like that is a high that I don't think that you can manufacture.
Totally. And then you walk away a better person because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was about to say, I noticed the cauliflower ear just now.
Yeah. My daughters call it, my wife hates it. She thinks it's gross, but my daughter one time she said, Dad, I like your ears. They're just like muscle ears. I'm hey, you know what? I'll take it. Yeah. Muscular ears.
I'm curious. So just in your 20s, some of the things, I love asking the question, what would you tell your 25-year-old self? What got you really into consulting and wanting to help businesses be more efficient and all that?
Yeah. So I think the one thing that I think was profound in my 20s is I actually got present to my control of my world. It was not until my mid-20s that I went from being a victim of my circumstances to actually realizing that, and not just superficially, but really realizing that where I was in life, good and bad, was my creation. Mm-hmm. It really was. And that was profound for me because, and it's a bad joke, right? When we come to that realization, it's a bad joke because you look back at your life and you go oh, this marriage that isn't going well, that's on me. Right. And the way I show up or my temper, I can't actually blame my parents for that anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm my own adult now, and you start evaluating all the negative, and it's kind of a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Now on the other side of that is now the power to do something about it. And so in my mid-20s, that was, roughly about like 23, 24, that was like a breakthrough for me at that point in my life where I was like, oh man, like everything I hate and everything I love has been my creation. And do you want to, what's the probable future if I keep doing what I'm doing? And I actually didn't like what I saw. So I was like, yeah, anyway, I need to make some changes.
Right. So, and what did that start with?
It started with my wife saying, I don't want to be with you anymore.
Wow. Yeah. That's a hard punch to the gut right there.
I mean, this is, anybody that's married, right? Like ultimately your spouse is probably someone that knows you more than anybody else. And it's a tough pill to swallow when your person, the person that really knows you, goes, I would rather be alone than be with you. I'd rather go through the hardship of a divorce than be with you. I'd rather raise kids by myself than be with you. That is a really, really difficult thing to confront. And at first, and I think it's the, it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? There's a path and growth. And the first couple steps on that path is what? Well, she's wrong and, she's not great, right? It's blame. And then after that, it's like, well, woe is me. Then we get to that stage of like, okay, I'll own it, but look at me. No one loves me. And, I'm stuck the way I am. And, then we're
You'll apologize, but no ownership.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we almost like, it's almost just that level of victimhood. And then if we can break through that, then it's like, no, I actually need to apologize to this person that doesn't want to be with me.
Yeah.
Now I need to go to them and say, you know what? From a non-manipulative perspective, I'm sorry how I showed up. Yeah. I'm sorry I wasted 5 years of your life. And you got hurt because of me. I'm sorry for all these things, and really like restore your integrity and owning how you showed up in the world. Yeah. And that's tough. And of course a divorce can really get one to start pondering those kind of things.
Wait, so did you end up getting divorced? No.
I ended up getting divorced. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I went through that whole kind of experience of feeling sorry for myself and being a victim and eventually having that paradigm shift of like, holy crap, I actually created this.
Wow.
This is on me.
Yeah. Are you remarried? Did you get?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I got remarried. We, between like divorced and separation and that, that's a whole other story of misery. But, I got remarried in my late 20s. I'm getting so old now that like, now I have these, I can't tell you if it was 28 or not, but I know it was like around
somewhere there.
In there. Yeah. Late 20s, early 30s is when I got remarried. So,
yeah. Oh, gotcha. Okay. So, you mentioned earlier you got into the Iron Council as a consumer. Yeah. So was that in this stage of life that you started doing the Iron Council? What led you to the Iron Council? Yeah. Yeah.
What led me, I was a friend of mine, Matt Jenkins, invited me to Facebook group, to the Order Man Facebook group. I thought it was his group. So I was like, sure, I'll support a friend kind of thing. Yeah. So I joined the group, and at the time, I had notifications on, so I'd get notified every single time someone made a post or whatever. Yeah. And I was just like, holy crap, like this is too much. This is too noisy. It's a distraction. So I went to the Facebook group to like unsubscribe, right? Cause I'm like, this is not valuable. And I went to go unsubscribe, and then someone had a post. I think maybe Ryan had a post, or someone had a post about the podcast. I thought, oh, it's like a podcast thing, right? And so then I listened to a podcast, and I was like, oh, this is good stuff, right? Like, I like this. And so I started subscribing and listening to the podcast. And then I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't have these people in my life. Like, I don't have these kind of guys in my life. And this is a failure of most men, right? Our friends are who? Our spouses our spouse's friend's husband,
right? Yeah.
Or the morons that we went to high school with that we like make them our friends because like we have this history, but like in the grand scheme of things, you're like, if I had to like make a rap sheet of who I should be hanging out with, it's not those guys.
Right.
Right. And there's zero intentionality around who we're surrounding ourselves around. And so I was like, man, like I want to be with like-minded men that are focused on becoming better men. And so I'm like, I'll join the Iron Council. And so I joined the Iron Council and I was literally there for like maybe a month or two. And I told my team lead, I said, hey, sign me up. And he's like, well, sign me up for what? Right. And I'm like, I want to serve.
Yeah.
Like I'm in, right? Like not just in like, hey, I'm here to consume. I'm here to contribute. Yeah. Like, how do I help? Because I was so bought into the mission of what that was. And so I'm like, sign me up. Shortly after, Ryan had me become a battle team leader and then eventually, started contributing on the podcast.
Yeah. So I'd love just to tell share with my audience, because I'm sure, all the wisdom you're ripping right now. If they wanted to hear more from Kipp, share a little bit what you do with Fridays in the podcast.
Yeah. So it's actually Wednesdays, but
Wednesdays. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. And it's not a big deal. Just clarifying. So we do 3 episodes a week. We have an interview show on Tuesdays, and those are just high caliber people that Ryan's interviewing, and this is no like, some dudes in a closet, right? Like legit, right? David Goggins, Jocko Willink, right? Like Tim Kennedy, legit, really like solid people, right? That we've been able, or Ryan has been able to get on the podcast. And then on Wednesdays, we have what we call Ask Me Anything. And what we do is we field questions from social media, from Facebook, or from our Brotherhood in the Iron Council. And we more or less say, hey, what questions do you guys want us to riff on? And so come Wednesday, we read off those questions and we just kind of have a conversation like this. And we just start addressing questions. And it's everything, man. Like everything from, I don't know, dealing with wife, kids, step parent, work, goal setting, alcoholism, pornography, anything. I mean, anything pretty much is available on the table, and we chat about it.
Yeah. Do y'all have a few like repeated questions that tend to always come around?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's some common things that we constantly see, and they're rooted in, a lot of them are rooted in dealing with scenarios with other people, right? And how do they get through them, whether it's a spouse or whether it's a boss or whatever. And hopefully you're asking for this. It's interesting because they're all rooted in the idea of how do I manipulate and change someone?
Yeah.
And we don't.
No personal ownership. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and that's the part that's always funny, right? Like, how do I deal with this? You're like, well, you're dealing with it from the paradigm of how do I get them to change? You don't.
Yeah.
So let it go.
Change you. Yeah.
Yeah. Let go of your expectations of how someone should or should not be, and deal in your reality of how you show up.
Yeah.
And be okay with them showing up how they show up. Yeah. Right. But we're so judgmental, right? We're so opinionated on how people should or should not be, that when it doesn't meet those expectations, then we add meaning to it, and then we stonewall, then we emotionally react, and we're getting nowhere. And all because we want to control people, or we have a whole like high and mighty opinion of how you should show up in the world. Are you joking?
Yeah. Never
going to work. And especially from a work perspective, right? Command and control, horrible cultural environment, right? Trust and inspire. That's what we want to get to in all areas of our lives, to be frank, not just at work.
Yeah. Oh shoot, Kipp. Now you get me all excited about this. So I'm curious now from that standpoint, as a consultant, and you work with many executives and leaders in business, is that a common problem you experience? Is leaders are like, all these people need to change, but I don't?
Oh,
how do you address that?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Well, and I think culturally, let me make this distinction if you don't mind. I think it's human nature for leaders to want to have command and control environments.
Yeah.
It's what we do. It's what we do with our kids. Your room's not clean. Yell, manipulate, shame, clean your room.
Yeah.
That's what we do because we think it's about the room. We've lost sight that what is it about as a leader? It's not about the room. In fact, it's not even really about the gross profits. It's not about the profit margin. It's about the people. That is who your job is to serve. The byproduct will be revenue. The byproduct will be success, but you have to serve people. And guess what? I'm not motivated by you trying to micromanage me. Those aren't intrinsic motivators for anybody, right? Intrinsic motivators are typically involvement, having an opinion, autonomy in the work that you're doing, being believed in, being trusted to bring your best work forward. Like we get the best out of our people when we allow them to be self-directed and we get their buy-in about what we're doing. But yet we never take that approach. And I think we don't take that approach because I think it's human nature. I think human nature kind of defaults to command and control. And the reality is it's not. Like it shouldn't be. It doesn't. It's not what's moving the needle forward. I had a great conversation with someone yesterday, and I really, really love this because we do this even in our culture. We have to fight to keep our culture, and because it goes against human nature, I think, for us to have an environment that's high trust. And yeah, in this conversation I had yesterday, it's like we want our employees not constrained by requirements, but driven by choice.
Yeah.
Not constrained by requirements, but driven by choice.
100%.
Empower them. I could go all day.
Yeah. Man, that's good. That's really good, Kipp. So kind of on that, this may be my last question here. I hope so. I don't want to keep you too long. But you talked about inspire and trust. God, trust is such a powerful thing. Good gosh. So what are some other tenets or maybe is there a process you take the men in the Iron Council through? And how would you describe that as well as, I was trying to what are the tenets of order of man, but really specifically, is there a process in the Iron Council?
Yeah, there's a couple things and we're always growing too, right? So let me share this and this is a transitional item that we're getting better at. And I think it's applicable to how we show up in our homes. It's applicable to our jobs and everything else, right? So, let's talk accountability. Number one reason why most guys join the Iron Council is they want more accountability. Now, the problem is they say they want it, but when they experience it, they're like, I don't want to experience it. Now,
thought this would feel better.
Exactly. Now, the other problem, though, is we misunderstand what accountability is. And this is a transition I think we're making in the Iron Council. It's something that we do here at Journey Team that we've gotten better at, and it's a constant thing on my mind. So let me share Iron Council experience, and then you can see how this relates to work and everything else. Okay. So I joined a team. I do kind of some drop-ins on teams every so often, just kind of see how things are going. And first element of accountability is there needs to be a cadence of the accountability, right? Like if I don't outwardly express and make a commitment, how do you keep me to that commitment, right? How do it needs to be expressed, right? And so we need to give our word and make commitments about what we're doing. That's level number one. Number two is you and I need to have established trust, of course, and you need to be in a position of influence. Otherwise, you're just trying to manipulate and control me or whatever. If I know it's rooted in care, now you and I can have a conversation. Okay. So that's element number two. Element number three is we need to understand the blocker. So on this particular call, guys were going over communicating their numbers, right? Of their commitments and if they honored those commitments for the week or not. And this particular brother had a commitment of daily scripture study and then going to church, every Sunday or something like that, a secondary tactic to go to church. And he comes to the table and he goes, I failed, blah, blah, blah. And his team lead is like, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? How can we help? And we have this conversation, right? And he's like, I'm just really busy and I need to make it a priority. And so, okay, well, do you need anything? I can call you, I can remind you. And we go tactic, right? Hack, right? How do we build a system, a hack or whatever, right? To address the issue, to help him and support this guy, which is not bad. Okay. I want to be really clear. It's not bad. But that's blue belt level stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? The black belt level stuff is, I asked this guy, I said, hey, when right, you're out of integrity, right? When you decide like, hey, I'm not going to go to church, you should, right? Like, and he's like, yeah, okay. And you have internal dialogue, right? When you say, hey, I'm not going to go, you have to justify it, because that's what we do. You don't go against your heart. You don't go against integrity without justification. So what's the justification you gave yourself? When you said, hey, I'm not going to go today, what's the story you told yourself so you could live with yourself? And it was like, well, I told myself that like today's the exception. I'm too busy today. And I'm like, okay. But it wasn't enough, right? I was like, well, I think there's more there. I go, let me ask you this. How did you think about yourself? What's your emotional state about yourself during that moment of justification? And his response was that I'm not worthy enough to go. That's a blocker.
Yeah.
Right? That's how we help people deal with what's blocking them from growth. That is how leadership shows up in a powerful way, is we need to get present to what's blocking someone from being fully committed and bought in to showing up powerfully in the world.
Yeah.
And in most cases, it's not hacks. It's not tactics. It's not systems. It's our belief system. It's how we see ourselves. And it's rooted way deeper than, oh, today was a busy day. No, that's the excuse. That's the surface level. It's much deeper than that. And so from an employment perspective, I ask my employees on a quarterly basis, how's job going? Any issues or whatever? And then I go, how's your job love? Are you loving it?
Yeah.
Are you bought in? Are you excited to come to work? Do you love what we do? And if the answer is, okay, awesome. What is it? What's blocking you from showing up powerfully as an employee in this org? And I don't do that to manipulate and get the most out of them. Now, will they perform better from that perspective? They certainly will, but they'll have fulfillment in their work when they're able to show up that way. And the things that block us from showing up that way, oh man, you'd be so surprised the things that come up, right? It's like, well, I don't get affirmation from you as a boss that I'm doing amazing work. And so I double question whether like I'm valuable or not. Check, right? I'll help do that better. Oh, I heard this rumor about blah, blah, blah. Okay, let me address that. I feel undervalued because I think I'm underpaid. And so it alters how I show up in the workplace because I think I'm taken advantage of. Check. They're all emotional things and we need to address those.
Man. Kipp Sorensen, everybody. Dang, that was good.
Yeah.
You brought it, man. I really appreciate it. God, that's so good. Blockers, man, being aware of those, just the self-awareness that comes from that. Men miss, there's so many times.
We never touch it.
No.
We never touch it. We walk around it all the time. We skirt around it all the time.
Oh, man, but you become so powerful and you become so worthy of being followed when you're willing to do that. Like you want to be led by somebody who's aware of those things.
Totally. And for those that are married, just to like make this real serious, go to your wife. And I'm saying this thinking about myself right now. Go to your wife and say, is our marriage amazing? And are you just ecstatic about it?
Yeah.
And when she says no, then say, what's stopping us from feeling that way?
Yeah.
What's stopping you from feeling that way? And just no excuses, no reasons, just listen, lean into it.
Yeah.
Understand that it's not reality. It's her reality. And you need to manage her reality a little bit too.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what she sees as true.
Yeah. I would say, best thing about marriage is it holds up a mirror, right? Totally. Best and worst, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, Kipp, where's the best place for people to connect with you and find you?
Yeah, man. I mean, there's lots of ways, but Instagram has kind of been my social media exposure of myself. So Kipp Sorensen, that's Kipp, two P's, Sorensen. That's Danish version, not the Swedish. Danish.
Gotcha.
Yeah. For all my Danes out there.
Well, Kipp, I appreciate you coming on, man. It was a blast talking to you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, man. It was great.
Thanks for listening to the Men Are Forged podcast. Like I said at the beginning, confidence is a thing that we struggle with as men, especially in leadership roles. And if that's you and you want to find out more how I help men do that and step more into their leadership in all areas of their life, then you can go to menarforged.com. You could sign up for a free call or even a free coaching session. I give 30-minute free coaching sessions for first-time potential clients. So go to menarforged.com and find out more how I can help you become the confident leader that you want to be.